Hey everyone, this is Andrew from Dividend Growth Masters. Now, it's been a little bit of a while since my last video, and given that we're in the middle of earnings season, I wanted to get back on to creating videos. So this video is really about how you prepare for earnings season as a dividend investor. Now, it's important to keep track of all the stocks in your portfolio. So at the onset of earnings season, it's typically a little busy for me. In general, I have typically between 30 and 40 names in my portfolio. So at the beginning of earnings season, I kind of like to get on track with everything in terms of what's going on with the names, what are the analyst expectations, and that sort of a thing. So there's really three things that I do that I want to share with you guys in terms of what my process really is. So the first thing I like to do is I like to get a recap of last quarter. And by this, I'll go through my notes. Typically, I have notes from last quarter in terms of what actually happened in terms of the earnings surprise, what the guidance was, my general thoughts, analyst commentary, that sort of a thing. And I'll also just gloss over the quarterly press release, the 10Q or the 10K, whichever was released, and then I'll also just briefly remind myself what was discussed on that last conference call. And I'll just kind of jot down some notes, probably half a page to maybe 1 page max, in terms of what to expect and to get myself acquainted with what's going to happen this coming quarter. Now, this is really important because most dividend investors, they actually don't really prepare, in my experience, for earnings season. They just kind of let the news flow occur and then react to it based on whatever happened. But I like to be a little bit more on top of things so that there's really no knee-jerk reactions in terms of buying or selling stocks on when the news actually hits. Now, the second thing I like to do is I like to get familiar with the numbers. And this is not only just the numbers of what happened last quarter in terms of things like sales growth, profit, EPS, guidance, that sort of a thing. What I'm really talking about here is more like the expectations in terms of analyst expectations for the estimates. So there are a lot of ways you can look up estimates. One easy way is just to go to Yahoo Finance. There are other websites that do this too, like NASDAQ and Seeking Alpha too, I believe. But let's just use Yahoo Finance as an example. If you go under analysis and search under a ticker symbol, I'm looking for Apple right now. But you can kind of see what the analyst expectations are for this coming quarter for June 2019. Let's look at the earnings estimate. So there's 35 analysts covering the stock, and the average expectation is for $2.10 of earnings per share. Revenue expectation is 53.42 billion. And the cool thing about Yahoo is they actually give you the earnings surprise history as well, so you don't actually have to go back and calculate it yourself. So that's kind of what I like to do. And the reason I like to do this is just to get a little more familiar on what's actually being expected of the company in the short term. Obviously, we want to look at long term, but in the short term, we want to be prepared for anything that might happen when they actually release their earnings. And then the third thing I like to do is just kind of prepare myself mentally for what will happen when they report earnings. And earnings can be a little bit of a volatile time for stocks, especially in recent quarters. So I typically like to imagine a worst case scenario and a best case scenario for when a stock reports earnings. The worst case is obviously, they miss earnings, they guide down, and the stock crumbles, basically. I try to imagine a situation like that. That way, if it does happen, then I'm prepared for it mentally. And if the stock does pretty well, then that's good. But I like to really prepare myself emotionally for the downside of the stock. And typically, when I'm analyzing the downside like this, I'll have a few situations where I'll sell the stock. So it's not a knee-jerk reaction, just because the stock fell, I'm going to sell the stock. No, it's more of a process that I have in terms of, if the growth segment isn't, growing as fast anymore, then that might be an indication to sell the stock. So I like to have that written down beforehand, before they actually report earnings or anything like that. So it's just not some knee-jerk reaction. I actually put some thoughts into it beforehand. So anyways, that's really my process for getting ready for earnings season. I know everybody has a slightly different process, so if you have something that's a little bit different than mine, or you think I should include something in my process, definitely let me know in the comments.